The rain had started softly in the late afternoon, a quiet drizzle that soon turned into a steady downpour. Emily sat in her apartment, curled on the edge of her armchair, the blanket around her legs barely keeping out the chill. Her eyes were closed, and she let herself breathe slowly, trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building all day. It wasn't just any ordinary day. It was the day she had promised herself. She would face something she had been avoiding for months. Her heart raced at the thought, and her fingers tapped against the blanket in a nervous rhythm. Across town, Daniel was navigating the wet streets with the hood of his coat pulled tight. His coat was damp from the rain, and each step left small splashes behind him. He had walked these streets countless times before, but tonight the city seemed different. There was a quiet tension in the air, almost as if the world itself knew. He was about to cross a line he had never dared to approach. Daniel's mind replayed all the conversations he had shared with Emily over the past month's late-night talks. Small confessions, laughter that felt more like comfort than amusement. He had imagined tonight 100 times, yet the reality of it was something he wasn't entirely ready for. Emily's phone buzzed on the side table. She reached for it, hesitant, and saw Daniel's message. "I'm outside. Can I come in?" Her breath caught. Her heart skipped. She had expected this message in some way, but seeing it on the screen made everything feel real, immediate. The rain outside blurred the streetlights into soft, golden streaks. And she felt a sudden shiver, not from the cold, but from anticipation. She typed back carefully, almost afraid to commit. "Yes, come in." The seconds dragged. Then came the knock, soft but firm, echoing through the small apartment. Emily's hand lingered on the doorknob longer than necessary. She closed her eyes briefly, telling herself she could do this, that she could let him in. When she finally opened the door, Daniel stood there, slightly wet from the rain. Hair plastered to his forehead, coat dripping. His eyes searched hers in a way that made her pulse race. There was no awkward pause, no hesitation. He smiled softly, a little apologetically, and stepped inside, shedding his coat, shaking off the rain in long, deliberate movements. The room smelled faintly of rain and the comforting warmth of her apartment. Neither spoke at first. They simply looked at each other, and in that moment, Emily realized that all the months of talking, all the messages and calls, had led to this single, quiet moment. The tension was thick, almost tangible, yet comforting. Emily finally whispered, almost to herself, "I didn't know if I'd be ready for this." Daniel's hand reached out and covered hers. Their fingers intertwined as naturally as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said gently. "Just let me be here." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of relief and safety she hadn't realized she was craving. For the first time that evening, she felt a strange kind of calm settle over her nerves. They moved into the living room, and Daniel carefully took a seat across from her, keeping just enough distance to respect her space. The sound of the rain was louder now, almost filling the room. They started talking initially about mundane things, the weather, the small inconveniences of daily life, but slowly. The conversation turned to memories, dreams, and the things they had never shared with anyone else. Emily laughed softly at a story Daniel told about his first job. And he laughed at her reactions, his eyes never leaving her face. It was easy, natural, as if the world outside had paused to give them this time. Emily noticed the small details. About him, the way he adjusted his sleeve when he was nervous, the little crease that formed on his forehead when he laughed. The way his eyes seemed to linger on her without expectation. And Daniel noticed her tooth, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. The quick smile that appeared when she was genuinely amused. The way her hand occasionally brushed against the blanket, almost subconsciously. These small moments created a quiet intimacy that was more powerful than any words could have conveyed. Hours seemed to shrink into minutes as they talked, sharing stories that revealed more about themselves than they had shared with anyone else. Emily found herself leaning back on the couch, eyes closing briefly, letting the sound of Daniel's voice and the patter of the rain blend into a comforting rhythm. She had imagined this moment many times, yet the reality was so much richer, more alive. She realized that she had been waiting for this, not just for him to come into her apartment, but for someone to truly see her, not just the surface, but the nervous, hopeful, sometimes chaotic heart she kept hidden. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her with quiet admiration. There was a tenderness in his gaze, an unspoken understanding that he was here not to demand or pressure, but simply to share the space with her. And Emily, feeling the gravity of that presence, realized she didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to explain herself. Here, she could just be. The storm outside grew heavier. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by the deep, rumbling roll of thunder. Both of them paused at the sound, and for a moment the world felt larger, more dangerous, more thrilling. It was as if the storm mirrored the whirlwind of emotions inside Emily: excitement, fear, longing, hope. She closed her eyes again, letting the energy of the storm, the warmth of Daniel's presence, and the soft light of the apartment envelop her completely. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room. Emily's hand brushed against Daniel's as she instinctively reached for the blanket, and he caught her hand again, holding it firmly. Neither said anything. The silence was comfortable, filled with the tension of the unknown. The possibility of something more, something neither of them could yet name. Emily opened her eyes slowly and met Daniel's gaze. There was a question there, subtle but unmistakably. Question about what might come next. About whether she was ready to step beyond the safety of words and shared laughter into something more profound. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she realized that this moment, brief and fragile, held the potential to change everything. Daniel spoke again, his voice low and steady. "I've been wanting to do this for months," he admitted, almost shyly. "Just be here with you, like this. Not just talking, not just laughing, but really here." His eyes searched hers, and Emily felt a shiver of recognition, a quiet thrill of anticipation. She had waited for someone to see her like this, and now, finally, it was happening. She nodded slightly, unable to find words that would fully capture what she felt. Instead, she let her hand remain in his, letting the contact speak for them both. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside a calm electric current seemed to hum between them. Every glance, every touch, every shared breath carried an unspoken promise of connection, of understanding, of something deeper than friendship. For a while, they simply existed in that space together, letting the sound of the rain, the flickering shadows, and the quiet intimacy build an invisible bridge between their hearts. Emily felt an unexpected clarity. She had been holding herself back, afraid of what might happen, afraid of vulnerability, but now, in the warmth of his presence, she realized that being open was not weakness. It was courage, just as she was, beginning to relax fully, to allow herself to truly feel the closeness between them. There was another flash of lightning, followed by a sudden, sharper clap of thunder that rattled the windows. Emily instinctively squeezed Daniel's hand, and he tightened his grip, not in fear but in reassurance. The storm outside mirrored the tension in the room, the thrill, the uncertainty, the promise of something just beginning. Emily closed her eyes once more, taking a deep breath, bracing herself for what she didn't yet know. Daniel leaned slightly closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you ready?" His words hung in the air, charged with meaning she could feel deep in her chest. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let herself breathe, let herself feel, let herself acknowledge the fluttering hope she had been nurturing for months. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, "Yes." And in that moment, Daniel's smile returned, soft and warm, full of relief and quiet joy. The storm outside continued its symphony, but inside, the apartment was still intimate and alive. with the electricity of two hearts inching closer, ready to cross the threshold of something unforgettable. Emily had no idea what would happen next, only that this night, this invitation, this moment, this shared breath would mark the start of a journey she had been longing for without fully realizing it. And as she closed her eyes, leaning back against the couch, she felt a sense of anticipation and excitement that made her heart race in ways she had never known. The night was far from over, and yet, in the quiet of her apartment, with the storm outside and Daniel's hand in hers, Emily understood something vital. Some moments didn't need to be rushed. Some moments, like this one, were meant to be savored, felt, and remembered. And tonight, she was ready to do just that. The storm outside had grown louder, the rain tapping fiercely against the windows, the occasional roll of thunder vibrating through the walls. Inside Emily's apartment, the air was warm, almost electric, filled with quiet anticipation. She leaned back against the couch, her hands still entwined with Daniel's. The world outside was chaotic, but here, in this small space, time seemed to slow. She felt the tension in her chest ease, replaced by a growing sense of trust, comfort, and curiosity. Daniel watched her, a soft expression in his eyes. There was something unspoken between them, a thread of connection that had been building for months and now held them both in its gentle pull. "Emily," he began carefully, his voice low, "I've been holding something back for a while. I want to tell you tonight, if that's okay." Emily's heart jumped. She had guessed what might come next, yet the reality of it still made her stomach flip. "You can tell me anything," she said softly, her voice carrying the quiet courage she hadn't known she possessed. He took a slow breath, his thumb brushing against the back of her hand. "I've fallen for you. Not just a little. Not just as a friend. I care about you more than I can put into words. I've been afraid to say it because I didn't want to risk what we have. But I can't keep it inside anymore." Emily's chest tightened. She felt a surge of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to fully experience before. Months of late-night conversations, shared laughter, and quiet support had led to this moment. Every memory they had made together flashed through her mind, the texts that made her smile at odd hours, the phone calls that ended too soon, the way she had felt seen in ways nobody else had noticed. Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "I feel the same way. I think I have for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it either." The words hung in the air, delicate yet powerful, like the fragile first rays of sunlight piercing through storm clouds. Daniel's lips curved into a small, relieved smile, his eyes softening as he closed the distance between them, just a little. He didn't rush, didn't push, just leaned in, his hand still holding hers, their fingers interlocked naturally. There was a quiet understanding in that gesture, a promise that whatever came next would be guided by patience and respect. They talked then, softly, about the moments that had led them here. Daniel shared memories he had never spoken of before, times he had felt uncertain, lonely, or unsure, and Emily listened, her own eyes reflecting empathy and warmth. She told him about her fears, her hopes, and the things she wanted to believe in but had hesitated to voice. Each confession drew them closer, their connection deepening with every shared word. Every gentle laugh, every sigh. Time seemed to bend around them. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the world had narrowed to two people and the unspoken promise of something new, fragile, and beautiful. Emily felt a clarity she hadn't known she was seeking, the understanding that love, or even the possibility of it, wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in a hand held in trust, in a whispered confession. In the simple act of being fully present with another person. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat, still watching her with that quiet intensity. "You know," he said softly, "I think I've imagined this moment 100 times. But nothing compares to actually being here with you, feeling this, seeing you, talking like this." Emily smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips that made Daniel's chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. "I know what you mean," she replied. "I thought I knew how it would feel, but I didn't. It's More, different, better, somehow. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, the kind that doesn't feel awkward but full of possibilities. Emily rested her head lightly against the couch's backrest, eyes closing briefly, savoring the warmth of his hand in hers. She could hear the rain pounding against the windows, the wind rattling the edges of the apartment, and yet none of it disturbed the quiet bubble they had created around themselves. Daniel leaned back in his chair slightly, his gaze never leaving her face. He noticed the way her eyelashes fluttered when she blinked, the faint curve of her lips, the soft rise and fall of her chest. There was a reverence in the way he looked at her, an awareness that this moment, this intimacy, was rare and precious. Emily in turn felt a mixture of vulnerability and exhilaration. She had opened herself up, admitted her feelings, and been met with acceptance and warmth rather than judgment. Do you think Daniel began cautiously? We could. I don't want to rush anything, but could we try to explore this? Emily's heart thudded. She had wondered about this, hoped for it, but hearing him say it aloud made it real. Yes, she whispered, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. I want that. I think we're ready. A smile spread across Daniel's face, a mixture of relief, joy, and quiet. He moved a fraction closer, their knees nearly touching. And their hands remained intertwined, communicating what words could not. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to force anything. The storm outside and the quiet of the apartment created a perfect, suspended world where the only thing that mattered was the growing bond between them. They continued talking late into the night, sharing dreams they had never shared with anyone else. Emily spoke of places she longed to visit, things she wanted to learn, fears she had yet to overcome. Daniel spoke of ambitions, of past disappointments, of the small victories that had shaped him into who he was. With each story, each confession, they found more reasons to care for each other, to trust, to hope. At one point, Daniel leaned back slightly and laughed softly, a sound that made Emily smile. I don't know why I was so nervous tonight, he admitted. Everything feels right, though, like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Emily nodded, feeling the same way. I was nervous too, she said. But I'm glad. I'm glad you came. I'm glad we're here. The rain slowed gradually, the storm moving on, leaving behind the scent of wet pavement and fresh air. But inside, the apartment retained the energy of the night, the vulnerability, the confessions, the mutual understanding, and the quiet thrill of love beginning to bloom. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she could feel, a balance of excitement and contentment that filled her chest and made her feel alive. As midnight approached, they moved closer, not in haste, but naturally, a simple shift that brought them face to face. Daniel brushed a damp strand of hair from Emily's forehead, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Not from cold, but from the intimacy of the gesture. His hand lingered for a moment, and in that moment, Emily realized that closeness could be more meaningful than anything she had imagined. They didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The connection they shared, the trust they had built, and the honesty of their feelings filled the space between them. Emily rested her head slightly toward him, sensing his presence and the quiet strength it brought. Daniel's thumb traced small, gentle circles over the back of her hand, each movement deliberate, reassuring. It was an unspoken conversation, a language of care, of attraction, of beginnings. Hours passed unnoticed. Outside, the city was quiet now, the storm leaving behind a calm that contrasted with the emotional storm that had just passed inside. Emily and Daniel sat together, hands entwined, occasionally exchanging soft words, gentle laughter, or quiet sighs. The world beyond the apartment seemed distant, irrelevant even, compared to the closeness they had discovered. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily, I want you to know that whatever happens, we can take it slow. No pressure, no expectations, just us. Emily smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I know, she said softly, and I want that too. I've never felt like this before, but I trust you. A gentle silence followed, comfortable, safe, filled with possibility. They had crossed an invisible threshold tonight, moving from friendship into something tender, romantic, and real. And though neither knew exactly what the future would hold, they knew they wanted to explore it together. The night waned into early morning, and Emily finally allowed herself to relax completely. She leaned back, eyes closed, feeling the warmth of Daniel's hand and the security of his presence. The storm outside had ended, leaving the world refreshed, renewed, and quiet. Inside, something new had begun, a connection that was delicate, thrilling, and full of promise. Daniel's voice broke the silence one last time before sleep crept over them. "Thank you for letting me in tonight," he said softly, almost as a prayer. Emily smiled, her heart full. "Thank you for coming," she replied, knowing in a way she hadn't before that this night would stay with her forever. And as dawn approached, painting the sky with soft streaks of pink and gold, Emily realized that love didn't always arrive in fireworks or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it came quietly, patiently, with a simple invitation, a held hand, and the courage to say what your heart had been longing to say all along. For Emily and Daniel, tonight was just the beginning.